There's water here. Would you like your glass of water?
Yeah, I'll just keep it on the side here. Thank you.
I feel like we're doing a service.
I've only seen this in movies. The organ at the back,
Yeah.
too.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to WECode's FinTech panel today. My name is Nabiha. I'm an Associate Director of Programming, and I'm really glad that you're here to join us today. Let me start with a quick question. How many of you have used a financial app recently? Venmo, Zelle, a banking app? Maybe you checked your balance. Maybe you invested. Maybe you sent money to a friend and did not think about it twice. Behind every tap, every transaction, every approval, every fraud alert, there are massive systems operating in real time. There are engineers building infrastructure, there are operators scaling platforms to millions of users, there are leaders making decisions about risk, regulation, AI, the list goes on. That is FinTech. And FinTech is not just about money, it is about opportunity. It determines who gets access to capital, who gets included, who gets protected, and who gets left out. This industry moves markets, it shapes economies, it impacts real lives. And today we are joined by three amazing women who are not just participating in that system, they are shaping it. First, we have Rosa Ramos-Kwok, a pioneer in global banking and technology, leadership, and a managing director at BlackRock, whose career spans Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, and JP Morgan Chase. And she is also someone who continuously works to open doors for the next generation of women in STEM. We have Kristen Castell, a purpose-driven FinTech leader and managing director of Cafe, building one of the only accelerator programs dedicated to improving financial outcomes for low to moderate income individuals. After a career in large financial institutions like BlackRock and JPM, she's also a financial entrepreneur. And lastly, but definitely not the least, we have Jagati Gururajan, a senior executive and founder of FinTech Women, leading organizations at the intersection of AI, governance, and mission-driven leadership. What connects them all is not just their impressive experiences. It is courage, it is adaptability, it is the willingness to build in spaces that are complex, regulated, and constantly evolving. So whether you see yourself as a finance person, tech person, both, or neither, this conversation is for you. Today we're pulling back the curtain on what really powers financial platforms, what leadership actually looks like, and how nonlinear careers are made in industries that are still being defined. Listen for the pivots, listen for the risks, listen for the mindset shifts, and start asking yourself where you might fit into this ecosystem. With that being said, let's get started. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our amazing panelists today. We're just going to start by giving the panelists a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? Yes, all right. We're going to have some fun today. So I'm Rosa Ramos-Kwok, as Nabiha said, Managing Director at BlackRock. I am a native New Yorker. So anybody from New York? Yeah, native New Yorker. I am from the Heights, and so you know, my journey to financial services took an interesting path, just coming from where I did, but I pride myself in being an immigrant and very interested in technology and problem solving, and that's what I'm about. And my daughter's here with me today too, coming for the ride.
Nice. Awesome. Oh wait, we don't.
Oh no, I don't.
Hold on. Can you hear me? I have the mic here. Okay.
Yeah, they can.
All right. Hi everyone, Kristen Castell, and yeah, I'm just having the best day meeting everyone. I feel like I'm learning so much from all of you, and so excited. My daughter Brooke is here as well, 10-year-old filming. She has a very specific job. But yeah, Kristen Castell. So currently I lead a nonprofit organization called Cafe, Center for Accelerating Financial Equity. And we built this over the last 3 years to really bring together and support growing fintech companies, helping these founders and entrepreneurs to connect them with potential customers that are banks, investors, regulators, bringing everyone together in this community to build together, and specifically technologies that help people's lives. And so before that, I did spend a lot of time in corporate building investment products, and then left to be a fintech entrepreneur and be part of building a company. So now with Cafe, kind of bringing the corporate and the entrepreneurial side together. So great to be here. Thank you.
So my name is Jagati, and I was trying to think, what can I say that Nabi has not already said? Perhaps I'll say this. What I'm working on right now, so FinTech Women is one part of my life, and the other part of my life is I work with a boutique consulting company looking at how AI operationalizes within an organization. So you have your strategy, but how do you actually make AI a part of your organization? And today's conversation brings all of that together for me. And I will stop there and give it back to you.
Well, I mean, I would just like you to know that these are some really great women here and great mentors, so please feel free to get to know them after this event, and I'll just get started with a few questions that I have for them. Hopefully you'll get to learn a lot. So I'd like to start with Rosa. You've built like a remarkable career across the many different companies and fields, often in spaces where women and Latinas are still underrepresented. How did you learn to navigate those environments early on? And what helped you create your own pathway when the traditional roadmap didn't always exist?
Thank you, Nabiha. And one point that I'd like to make is that you don't know where you're going to end up. And I certainly was like, I'm going to be this, technologist and have this wonderful career in financial services. I never thought that world was available to me. Because where I lived, that was not the case. Like my parents were raised us on minimum wage. Like we didn't have much. And so when I finished college and I applied to a training program, and they said, we're going to teach you how to code. And I had like some science and math behind me and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay. I was liberal arts major. And I started this program at Morgan Stanley. And I was like, could I do this? Like, I really was like unsure of myself. And I'm sure you've been in those shoes, right? When you're like, I'm not sure if I can handle this, can I? And with every training that we did, at one point, the light bulb goes off. And you're like, wow, I can do this. The other feeling that I had was like, but do I belong? And what got me through the I belong was more around getting that confidence and like, I can actually code. I can fix this problem. I know what to do. I can bring value to this business problem. And that brought me really a lot of joy because I'm like, it's not only that I could do it, I actually like doing it. And I think sometimes for women, when you have like I'll call it some nerdy things, and people are like, oh, do you really like that? I'm like, yes, I do. I really do like that. And what I learned that kind of like gave me that seat, or felt like I had a seat at the table, was knowledge. It sounds really like cheesy, but knowledge is power. And what I found was that the more subject matter expertise I acquired, the more confident I became. Because I was like, no, I know the answer to that question, and I know it from every single angle. And that's how I started like carving that path, by just knowing and taking that leap on using the knowledge that I had acquired.
Well, that was very inspirational, and yeah, like I think knowledge is very powerful. I'd like to ask Kristen a question more entrepreneurship focused. So you often talk about starting with why, and how has leading with purpose influenced the way you evaluate founders, partnerships, and fintech innovation more broadly?
Thank you. Yeah, and I was actually just talking about this at the mentorship circle with people, and I talk about this with the founders I support every day. Always, what is your why? And leading with the why is so important. Whether you're in corporate or you're in entrepreneurship, why are you doing that something? Why does it matter? Like, why are we even building? Like, why is this building this product? Like, it is for, whatever the purpose is, to help someone's life. Like, save for college, save for retirement, build something in someone's life. So over time, even building products in corporate, I was like, okay, that's great that you have a specific role, but what's the big picture? How does that connect? And then what is that outcome that we're building toward? And how is that helping someone's life, which is the why in that case? And so I always have, the founders and companies I work with introduce themselves like, I believe that, people in this country, the financial wellness, people are struggling, right? If there's an emergency and they don't have $400 and like they're struggling. And so that's I believe that that's tied to, money is just an exchange of value for what you want in life. And a lot of people don't have that access. And so then what's the how and the what? And so I think like framing any job or anything you're doing in that will drive you toward like the purpose and give more meaning in any kind of role you're doing. So I always believe in like starting with the why. I mean, in our program, I meet with a lot of banks and fintech founders and everyone. Number one for us is the people and the culture and the collaboration. What I found is like those mission-driven people that really want to work with others and help collaborate with others, those are the people that go far. So that's number one for us when we're evaluating companies for our program. Like, what's your why? How do you want to work with others? And like, then it goes into technically, okay, what's your solution? What did you build? Of course, all of that has to be there too. But I think that's what makes people special. So
that was very meaningful insight. Yeah, I think purpose and just knowing your why is very important. Thank you. And I'd like to ask Jagathi a more like question related to AI, because I think that's, AI is always booming and people have their opinions about it. So I was wondering, through your work with community banks, you focus on helping smaller institutions use AI to deliver services comparable to like large financial players. What opportunities excite you the most, but also what risks do leaders need to take more to be more thoughtful about like AI usage?
Yeah. So I will throw a little bit of lens on community banks, but also generally speaking, right? Because it's such a big conversation. So just as a quick kind of connecting dots here, much of my career has been with the large banks that cannot fail globally. I mean, think about UBS. BlackRock has not been my client, neither has JP Morgan. But I could drive down that strip in Stamford, Connecticut, where you see every big bank having their office, and they were my clients. So there is a completely different approach over there when you think of the large financial services. I'm going to draw on some of the comments that both of you made, because fundamentally banks are about movement of money and the money in exchange of value, right? But everything when you break down what a bank does, it's a transaction at the end of the day. Whether you want to call it a bookkeeping transaction or whatever, it breaks down in the most minute unit is a transaction. So with the way the big banks look at it, and what they have in their corner right now is data that is of a scale, because they are large, because they're global, data of a scale that is unthinkable. And data, why is data a conversation in AI? Because more data you have, better your models are going to work. So the big banks have that. I did my work there, and I pivoted to working with small and mid-sized organizations. Community banks are part of it for two reasons. One is because they're mission-based, and there's something that touches me as a human being from the mission perspective. But from an AI perspective, there's an opportunity for smaller organizations to level the playing field to a certain point if they adopt and integrate and use AI smartly. So that, from a purely business person standpoint, is both fascinating, plus it feeds my soul when I work with smaller mission-based organizations. So the challenge here is this, right? So with large organizations, when you think of a JP Morgan as an example, it's a cruise ship trying to turn. It takes a lot of time, because AI at the end of the day will change operations, will change productivity, will restructure the organization beyond anything we have ever imagined. But they are the large cruise ships that are slowly pivoting, and it's going to take them time. The smaller organizations are like a sailboat. They can turn on a dime. So they can change, they can turn, and they can, if their leadership is open to these conversations, they can change how they do their business very often. There's a community bank in Memphis that recently launched, they call it B3 Connect, it's called Bank 3 Connect. And what they launched is really the capabilities for their customers that are very similar to the big banks. Photographs for check processing, safety at levels that the big banks have right now, but community banks couldn't offer before. So AI has that ability to level the playing field. However, I think the risk to your question, the risk really is they are fiduciary organizations. They have a fiduciary duty of trust and obligation of managing money and managing their customers' trust. So how do you kind of reconcile all of that? So it has to be a balance, a very kind of thoughtful balance between appreciating their core business, serving the community, that is what smaller organizations do, and the higher responsibility they have of managing money.
Yeah, I think when I first talked to Jagati, I think this like whole concept with community banks and AI was just really fascinating, and it kind of opened my eyes to like everything that's possible and how fintech is not just like the big players. There's a lot you can do, and I hope you got the same message. Right now, like especially as an undergraduate student, I realize that fintech can be very intimidating and opaque from the outside. So for students who don't yet see themselves as finance people or tech people, what are some entry points or mindsets that can help them get started?
So first of all, I'm going to ask all of you a question. Do we look like finance bros? There's more to finance than what you think finance is. So I'm sure that if I polled all of you have not just one, maybe two pieces of technology that you never leave home without. Am I right? Technology is everywhere. It runs everything that we do. And so if you want to have a very fulfilling career, you are going to look and think about, and you should, in my opinion, think about technology in more than just the typical places. And so all those things that we've been talking about, moving money, AI, or helping people, that are underprivileged or lower socioeconomic status, that don't understand how to build their own nest egg. All of those things are possible with technology. Technology has to make sure, and I think it's really important that we have the representation in technology of a very diverse community, because in everything that we are developing, you're going to have a very different mindset than other people. And so you should also think about being everywhere where technology is. I know for myself, like thinking about, and I remember when we first met, right? We had that conversation around like, oh, you do technology? I've been a software engineer. I have led infrastructure organizations. I've led risk organizations, cyber organizations, platform organizations. And it's all in technology, and it's all about making a difference in the world of finance. In some way, I've left my mark, whether that is, have any of you been to Europe? Yeah? What's the currency there? Do you remember? Euro? Do you know that did not exist a number of years ago? Like before you were born, but do you remember that? It did not exist.
Yeah.
What made the euro possible was technology. And I got to work on that project. And that was historical, because now you can't go anywhere with like, oh, the value of the euro. Like that didn't even exist before 1999. All of you were not even born yet, I know. But my point is that you can work on things that impact real people lives that you wouldn't even think possible. So that's what it looks like.
That's great.
I love that. So I just want to say again, to emphasize what you said about, I'm so excited for everyone in this room to be part of building this future, because we need that diversity of thought and culture and everything building the future, because there's so much here. And what I would add, so you started talking about the euro. That's so cool that you worked on that. And I know it's a different panel, but it makes me want to talk about blockchain because all of that, because we're focusing a lot on that now. I think there's huge applications for exchange of value and all that. But what I would say is, and I'm probably like the least technical person in this room. Like I never, coded and built technology, but I've worked in building products. I've worked with the technologists, with the marketing people, the salespeople, the investors, legal, operations. My job in these corporations was bringing all of those people together. And so I think there's not just one role when you think about, oh, I want to work in fintech or I want to work in tech. Like, there's all of these different people and specialties that come together that build these products and companies. And it's actually someone asked me about this before, it's the understanding how to work with all these people, understanding how they speak, bringing them together to design and build these products. And then we talked about this earlier, but like, what are they doing in people's lives? So understanding who is consuming them, how am I gonna go to Walmart and buy something, and what is that technology that's enabling me to just swipe and like pay for something, or what is the back end there? So everything is tech, right? It's so interesting. So you say fintech, and it's funny because actually everything's fintech, and not just tech companies and not just banks or finance companies. It's embedded in all of our lives. And what does that look like in the future? So
It's everywhere.
yeah.
I'm going to add on to what you just said, because I was at a conference earlier this week, and the tagline there was "FinTech is FinLife," and I think it was James Ma that actually said it the first time, but it is so true. It's like it is the two pieces of technology you don't leave home without. It doesn't matter what industry any of you eventually land. You are selling your product, and that selling is finance. So FinTech is all over. Whether it's biotech, you go to your doctors. Whether you work in a financial services firm, you work in the financial team within an organization, it doesn't matter. It's tech and money, so fintech.
Makes the world go round.
It does.
Yes, wait, that was really amazing. Thank you so much for the insights. I wanted to give an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions while we have time. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm going to be starting an internship in the summer in quantitative trading. And I come from a completely CS background, like no fintech. What do you kind of recommend as resources to tap into or communities to join? And also, I guess, like, how do you kind of find your foot in a quantitative space like that?
So first of all, if you got the internship, you could do it. Congratulations. No, absolutely, congratulations. You would not have gotten an offer if they didn't think that you could actually do it. So like, you're very qualified. So that's one, like you go in positive, saying, I can do this. If you can, like one of the things that I love about internships, especially as you are coming from a university setting, is a sense of like, you're gonna be in a class. Usually like you come together, like you probably, like when we all started, like you start in a class, you have a cohort, you have an immediate, on day one, you have a network of people. You will not be alone. So there's always safety in numbers and everything, right? Like, oh my gosh, did I just hear that? Is that right? Like, what do we have to do? So that's one thing, and I think it's such a great way to get started on anything, right, is just learning. When you're there, like just read as much as you can about the company and understand the culture, just as if you were going to school, right? Like you'd learn about the culture, you visit, whatever, right? All those kinds of things. And then I would just say, just be a sponge. Like just prepare yourself to be a sponge. Be there on time, if not early. Stay until after your boss leaves, and make sure that you are indispensable over the summer.
And I would add to that, yeah, it's all about the relationships. So what we just said about the relationships among your class, but in the firm, ask for opportunities. So can I be at that meeting, right? Can I be part of that project? Asking for opportunities, building those relationships, because it's great to have the knowledge and subject matter expertise, but it's really in business you find all about the relationships. So how do you start those connections? So down the road when you're somewhere else, you can call someone that you had worked with at that internship, right? And you can make those connections. So
it's amazing. We don't know each other before this, but our thinking is so similar. So Nabiha, kudos to you for bringing us together. So add on to all of this, I would have spoken about relationship, but you said that. But maybe one other thing, right? When you say quant, the first thing that comes to people's mind is a quant bro. It's very possible that most of your cohort who's coming into that internship program with you are men or boys, right? That is fine. Find them, make friends with them too, because You do, again, the same thing. The network, as much as I would recommend, look for the women and make friends with the women, look for mentors, but equally, historically, if you look at the space you're going into, it has been men leading that space, right? So look for mentors there as well. It may seem intimidating, it may, I don't know the organization, it doesn't matter. What are they going to do? Not talk to you? That's fine, somebody else will. No.
And have fun.
Thank you so much for your answers. Yes, our next question.
Hi, so I'm a computer science major, and I think I have a somewhat similar question, but it's more about actually applying to the internships themselves. So I kind of feel a bit discouraged when seeing like Capital One or these other huge companies post applications for internships, but I'm only a CS major and I don't really have a huge background in finance. So I was wondering if you have any recommendations for how I can make myself stand out in the actual application process.
I'll start and then I kind of know what they're going to say, I think, in my head. But let me start for all of us, and then I'm going to hand it off. So first things first, everything today with regards to recruiting and internships are very competitive, right? And we were talking about this at the mentoring circles. Because everybody's got access to the same LLMs, all resumes tend to look similar to the recruiting manager. So first thing I would recommend is networking, human to human, and try to get recommendations to get you on top. What differentiates you in a stack of resumes is generally not what's in your resume, but who puts you on top of that stack. That's always been the case. So I would say, start looking at that. If you're interested in Capital One, look to see, whether among the speakers, amongst everybody here, who's got a connection to Capital One, that who can help you have a conversation inside. So I would recommend, it doesn't matter what role you're looking at and where you're trying to go in your career, I would emphasize going old school to human relationships and human networking and building your network and getting everything that you have to offer in those conversations.
Yeah, I love that. I also would say, I don't know if it matters did they specify majors? I feel like it doesn't matter what major unless there's like a very specific technical skill they're looking
That's
for.
what I was going to say. Okay. I don't think it really matters, honestly. I think if it's like in a technology area, they're going to teach you everything that you need to know. You're bringing your technical skills there. I don't think it really matters.
And how do you stand out? I think in college, I got involved in a lot of clubs, organizations, or even after something sparks your interest, like I got involved in microfinance, but whatever sparks your interest, like the more you have leadership roles, team roles, different interests like that you're involved in, I think that makes you just different and stand out. Like what do you, besides going into a banking job or a finance job, what else are you doing, right? What else is interesting to you? Like you coded an app, like that's cool. Like what, what else?
I agree. I think there's other opportunities. Many times those big companies do things like hackathons. They'll sponsor them with in different schools, et cetera. So don't just look at applying, but take a look at their programs. Where are they coming, right? So because all of those opportunities are actually fronts for recruiting. And so they're going to take a look. Yeah. They're going to take a look at how do you behave in a group setting? Are you the one that's leading the group? Are you problem solving? Do you work well in a team? And so those are really good opportunities, and they're typically free.
Great idea with that. Who has been part of a hackathon before?
Oh, look at that.
Keep doing that. Just know you're being observed.
Oh, there's a question over there. Did you have a question? Yes. Yep.
Yeah, talking about hackathons, I participated in 4 and I loved them. And I wanted to ask a question about how do you see fintech companies using AI in the future?
How do we see fintech companies using AI in the future?
Startup companies or all? Yeah. Okay. I mean, they all are now. Yeah. I mean,
it's like an.
As we go, okay. I think it's just going to be part of doing business anywhere, not just fintech. And I think in fintech or financial services, don't stop looking at just AI, look at everything else. You mentioned blockchain, but there's a whole ecosystem of emerging technologies that are in there or that are going to, we don't know, but are going to be developed. So look beyond AI to see, I guess, the advantage of technology in financial services?
So pretty much all the companies I work with in my programs somehow have AI built into technology. And it's interesting because there's so much noise now. Everyone's like selling AI. And the banks are scrambling, everyone's scrambling. What is AI, right? And it's just another tool, another technology to help with whatever, building and the processes. So it's interesting, there's a lot of like noise and FOMO. A lot of the early stage fintechs have to say .ai to talk to any investors that will invest in them, because now everyone wants to invest in AI. Anyway, but there's real applications, right? And what I love about it, just in my space with technology that are helping people's lives, is the personalization and like meeting people where they're at. Instead of just out of the box products that maybe a lot of people can't access for getting a personal loan or getting capital or whatever it is, now AI can be used to personalize at scale, and fintechs can help that to really meet people where they are. And that's like a developing process. So I'm sure there's more that's gonna come out about that. So.
Yeah. The one thing that I was gonna say is that actually financial services has been one of the industries that have been using AI for a really long time. You just didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
But you talked about it, Nabiha, when you started, like around fraud or how do you check for like credit, et cetera. Those are models. That's AI, like it's models. That's how you do all of those things. The other big thing that is prevalent in financial services, I mean, some of the things that I worked on early in my career, is anything is automated. Do you know how many transactions? You talked about this. At the end of the day, it's a transaction. It's not like onesie or twosie transactions. It's millions and millions and millions and millions of transactions. It's trillions of dollars going through systems. You can't just do that without like a lot of heavy modeling, a lot of heavy transaction, a lot of automation, and a lot of AI. So if that is something that you're interested in, financial services has been one of those industries that has actually used that technology for a really long time.
That's
Okay. Hope you're okay.
I really liked how you were talking about how fintech is so well-rounded and there's so many interesting areas to it. But I also know that finance in general is a pretty regulated industry, so it would be really interesting to take into account stakeholder opinions and how it's going to impact the people at hand. So my question is how do you push for that progress and take advantage of AI and technology, and how do you communicate that to maybe coworkers who are a little bit less technical? What's the typical approach that you guys take?
That's a good question. So I think one of the things that, one of the skill sets that I used very early on, I developed, I don't come from I don't have a CS degree. I think I mentioned that. I have a liberal arts background, right? I learned how to code at this training program on Wall Street. That's how I acquired my technical skills, and also just interest, right? Just learning other things. And so I knew the bits and bytes, and I knew how to code, I knew all the technical jargon, et cetera. But I think I also knew how to communicate. And so I remember I had to go to a meeting to explain an issue that we had. And I had to explain it to a very senior audience. And I'm like, what are the things that they could understand? And how do I talk about it? Not so much that I'm totally making it so simple that it's okay, you're kind of I get it, But I really put it in terms of something that they could understand. And I remember the senior person coming to me and saying, one, that was a really good analogy. You did a really great job of explaining something very, very technical in a way that we could understand. So communication is a skill set that goes hand in hand with, I think, excelling in technology, because whether it's selling a product or whatever, you have to sell that. I think the other part of your question, actually, we kind of touched on it a little bit before, around innovation and just almost selling your ideas to colleagues and others. Organizations are organizations everywhere. Harvard is an organization. To get this accomplished, this whole conference accomplished, I'm sure you had to talk to people, you had to organize people, you had to get some backing, you had to do all those things. It's the same way in business. If you have an idea, you talk to your boss about it. What is it? It's this. Okay, maybe you talk to someone else about it. The one thing that I have seen, at least in all the companies that I have worked in, they all are eager for innovation and great ideas. And those ideas can come from anywhere. So when you're thinking about where to focus from a career perspective, look at the culture. Is it inclusive? Is it one where they welcome speaking up? That has been true where I have worked, and it's something that I have certainly enjoyed, but it's always been open.
I'd like to hit on the last point because, yeah, culture is so important. So definitely when you're looking for your jobs, I think it's better to have a better culture and manager than how good whatever the job is than anything. That's been key. But I want to hit on, because you asked a really good question about the regulated finance space. It is really tough to work in finance. Like a lot of these people that have built these amazing fintech technologies as startups, then, and are selling through banks, are like, oh wait, now I have to comply with all these regulations. I have to get my compliance here, the risk here. It's a lot. And so it's really, what you said is really important to understand that and keep up with the news and what's going on with regulation. But there's always an interplay, the innovation and the risk management and regulation. So, and that's been changing, as we know, in the last couple of years in certain spaces. So there's always kind of a play there.
And I think innovation is helping that space. Mm-hmm. So you could look at regulation as like, oh, it's regulation. Or you could look at regulation and say, ooh, how could I use technology to make it easier for me to understand that regulation, to apply that regulation?
I'm going to touch on a harsher part of organizational culture. Because as I was hearing the question, I went back to the times when we were trying to innovate. When I'm a recovering big corporate person, but when I was working there, politics is a huge thing, right? So, and that comes from, as much as organizations try to build a good culture, supportive culture, kind of collaborative cultures, it does come back at some point to politics. There's always an element of that. And as people in your early career, you may not be exposed to it as much, even though it exists. So one thing to do as you're building your careers is, build your tribe, who you can bounce ideas with. Build your support system across. You'll eventually learn how to navigate politics because all of you are capable young people, and you will figure this out. But that doesn't go. If there's an organization more than 2 people, there's politics there because everybody's agenda, everybody wants to march to a slightly different tune. So there could be that too.
Yeah, back to the relationships being most important.
Exactly.
Right, at
I
any
agree.
level, building those relationships.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There are some questions here. Big role. So I'll tell you, middle class Bombay growing up, right? There's no way I would be sitting in this. I mean, if you sit, I encourage all of you to come here and look out. This is fabulous. There's nothing in my growing up that would have told me I'm going to come here and have a conversation like this with all of you. So a couple of things, right? Like, it's not always that you hear a mentor does not come fully formed in your life. So I would encourage, anybody that gives you peer mentors and such, right? It doesn't matter where it comes from. It could be somebody younger than you who tells you something that you're not thinking because they're looking at life from a different perspective. So mentors don't come fully formed. They come in all shapes, all sizes, all of that. So that's one part of it. But there's also this concept of formal mentorship that happens in organizations, right? Definitely lean into that. At the same time, look for mentors that are not formally your mentors, that cannot advocate for you, that cannot, in that discussion between 5 people who's going to get that promotion, maybe they're not in that room, but they have the ability to influence elsewhere. So look for them, because when I look back at my career, people that have supported my growth have come in the most unexpected places. So I would encourage to have encourage you to have a very open mind around what that word means.
You know, I was going to say, I don't think anybody gets anywhere on their own.
Exactly.
Right? Like you need people around you. And I know for me, I felt like I've had mentors as early as like junior high school, when a teacher pulled me aside and encouraged me to apply to the Bronx High School of Science, right? They're like, you could do this. I'm like, I could go to that high school? Like, and they pushed me. They really were like, they were thinking about me. That's somebody that cares about you. And so that's like kind of natural kind of mentorship. I think the other aspect of mentorship that I have enjoyed is, or benefited from, has been like somebody that you connect with. Like, what do you have in common with someone? And how could you build on that, right? Like, I think that's another aspect of mentorship. I think the other aspect of mentorship is also remember that the mentor is taking time, giving you advice based on their experiences, whether that is senior to you, a peer, or younger. Like they're giving you something that you want, right? That you want some advice. Be prepared to apply it. Right? So, and just be prepared to make sure that you're not wasting someone's time, and because it's a two-way street. But you have to, as a mentee, you have to kind of do a lot of the driving. But it is such a rewarding experience, and one that you should always look for in every aspect of your life.
I agree with everything everyone said, so I don't have much to add, but I think what we're hitting on is being coachable and flexible and having a growth mindset. I think the number one thing that served me in my life and my career is having a growth mindset, meaning I don't know everything, I'm learning every day, I like learning every day, and you can do that from a mentor. I've had many mentors, formally and informally, but also, yeah, a lot of it's been peer mentor, like people in the same boat, kind of lifting each other. I love the shine theory, if people have heard that, so I've even curated like events around that, but that's lifting people up at the same level. You know, how do we all help each other do better? So I love that.
Yeah, we could all rise. We could all rise.
Yeah, we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Yeah.
So my question was kind of, I think Kristen, you touched on this a little bit about finding the why of the product. And in terms of finding your own why of why you're in a certain sector or place in fintech, because I know you guys come from really different sectors of fintech. So just how would you go about finding why you want to do something in a certain sector?
You don't have to have everything figured out right now. I feel like that question, and you know, there's so much pressure, I think, in college, and then even especially right after college. I remember in my 20s, because it's like, okay, what do you do now? Now you're supposed to like actually have everything together, which you don't. You still like evolve and change. Like, I think it's following opportunities or things that give you light and spark. I didn't know what my why, or you know, now that I'm doing, you know, more financial inclusion with tech and all that, I just, you know, I was getting my MBA and I saw someone speaking about microfinance, like teaching a person to fish, giving a woman an, you know, opportunity and loans to build her own business and lift herself out of poverty. And I'm like, I love this. I didn't learn this in school. Like, how do I get involved? I just went up to the founder and I was like, let me just get involved in any, you know, as a volunteer. 15 years later, I'm on the board. They just flew me to Samoa. Like, but it also kind of shaped, even in financial services and corporate, like what I cared about in terms of social impact through the technologies and business and all that. I don't know. So I don't think there's a magic answer now. It's like, what gives you spark in life when you're open to opportunities? I don't know.
I think the one thing that you have to look for is joy. What genuinely brings you joy? What makes you feel happy? I think I was at work the other day and I was preparing for a meeting and I was like, okay, I'm gonna like put this like detailed spreadsheet together, I'm gonna do this. And I was there and before I knew it, it was like 8 o'clock. I didn't mind doing it at all because I loved it. And I was like, oh, I'm like really ready for this tomorrow. And I was just like, I was still smiling after a long day because I genuinely really liked doing it. And so you will find your why, but think about what makes you feel joyful in what you are doing.
I love that. Yeah, it's all
Maybe
connected.
I'll add one more idea. Just take the risk. If somebody offers you something you've never done before and you're like, I don't know, they have seen something like our first conversation here. They have seen something in you that you're probably not seeing in yourself. So take a risk. And you'll figure your way out of it.
Yeah. For our last question, yeah, you can go ahead. Thank you.
I can imagine that fintech is a very lucrative space for hackers. So I was wondering, do you guys have any experiences facing data leaks or social engineering?
So, sorry. We didn't speak about cybersecurity. By the way, that is a great professional path as well. We didn't talk about it. I'm going to actually have Rosa talk more because you probably lived and breathed that. But what I want to suggest, though, is to just have everybody think about, because it's a highly regulated environment, people just don't throw solutions out in the market, out in business, out in operations. There's lots of guardrails, lots of controls in place in how technology gets rolled out in financial services. Regardless, one of the maybe very close to AI, probably the technology that most organizations look at is cybersecurity, and how do you protect the data within the organization. But that said, practical.
No, I was going to say, most large companies these days, cyber is one of the biggest threats that we have in the entire world. They have programs for data leakage, they have programs for phishing, all of those things. I know when I was in cyber, one of the things that I learned is just evaluate the risk. Think about the what ifs. Like if you're really good at problem solving, you're thinking about it, like having that mindset of like, what could go wrong? What angle can this thing crack, right? You have to think that way to really find where the vulnerabilities are in something. We all face this, by the way, in our everyday life. So AI has been a huge disruptor in cyber, because now those emails that you would get, those phishing emails that used to have misspellings, not anymore. They're perfectly formed and they look great, because all of the technology that is available to large companies is also available to hackers. So just be careful out there too.
Thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you to our panelists today. I hope you learned a lot, and yeah, a big round of applause, please. They were amazing. Yay! Oh yeah,
So,
we have something.
Yeah, I want to do something with everybody. So we're going to do one of those reverse.
A group
selfies.
photo.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So
Yes.
let's try this.
You want everyone to stand up, or
Could everyone please stand up so the camera can see you? Thank
where do you
you.
want? We have to kind of hide down here.
Yeah,
All
there
right.
we go. Yay. Okay, everybody say WECode.
WECode.
Excellent.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Can you take a photo just this way? Because I think it's so brilliant.
I'm gonna do that.
I didn't bring my camera with me, but this is just an awesome.
This is beautiful.
I would love to have that picture too.
Sorry, can I have everyone's attention, please? Sorry, one second.
Please, yeah.
You want us to
Rosa
stand
also
together?
has a fireside chat next in the sign center
Nabiha.
if you want to go. So
Maybe you
yeah.
come here.
Yeah.
Oh, the water's here. Great. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. I didn't even kind of realize I was almost wearing Harvard color.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Olivia, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our AI and Ethics panel. Joining us today, we have Minerva Tanakoto, the first CTO of New York City and the former chief of AI at the NYU McSilver Institute. We also have Francesca Roski, who is the IBM Global Leader on Responsible AI and AI Governance. And last but certainly not least, Kara Peterson, the co-founder and CEO of Describe.ai and the co-host of Building AI Boston podcast that you might recognize earlier from the Startup and Entrepreneurship panel. Before we dive into the questions, can we please give them a big round of applause? All right, first we're going to start off with some speaker-specific questions. First for Minerva, you've leveraged AI for social good throughout your career, like for example by directing poverty-focused AI initiatives at the NYU McSilver Institute, among so many others. How can AI be designed to support social services without reinforcing these existing inequalities or biases in public systems?
Thanks, Olivia. Thanks, everybody, for coming. So a little bit of background. The McSilver Institute is part of the Silver School of Social Work. It's the Institute for Poverty, Policy, and Research. So all the focus and all the research at McSilver was related to the study of poverty and policies related to it, but it was also affiliated with the School of Public Health. And so it took a much broader view. My job was to actually start the AI hub at the Institute, which really was to invent a way that you could use, at that time, machine learning and predictive analytics to support the study of and writing of policies for to address the issues of inequality, poverty, for those who are most underserved. And sort of the subtext of that was also to do it in such a way that it did not do it in an extractive way, and optimized it for positive outcomes. Because the motivation of research is so important in defining the project. So in short, we did it as a kind of interdisciplinary approach. The group, the hub was comprised of the data scientists and computer scientists, PhDs and postdocs and graduate assistants in AI and machine learning. But also part of the hub were social workers themselves and the communities themselves. So we took a three-part approach to make sure that we not only understood the data in the context, but also were understanding how we were going to use the predictions and findings in the community itself. And so that is one of the ways to go in. And then the other was we went in knowing that a lot of the data collection was already biased. We already knew certain aspects of the impacts of poverty were undercounted amongst particularly Black and brown adolescents, but also Native American and other groups. And so we also took a side study of figuring out which algorithms could best be used to balance that data so that we could improve the predictive power of the findings that we made and could compare them. So we compared 5 different algorithms for their predictive power and in the data balancing. So we actually did a 2-pronged approach, I would say technical and also cross-disciplinary.
Thank you for such a thoughtful response and just an overview on your interdisciplinary approach during your time at the McSilver Institute. On the topic of interdisciplinary approaches towards AI for social good, now for a question for Kara Peterson. For CS students interested in building AI for social good, what lessons from building Describe would you share about designing systems that are both useful and accountable to the people that they serve?
I think my first piece of advice is study public health a little bit. So the reason I say that is my background, I'm a non-technical founder and spent most of my career actually in nonprofits, and worked in both the Boston University School of Public Health and the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, running their communications team. And I was in that field for about 10 years. In other parts of higher education before that, and I really do think I got a lot of osmosis through being around public health people. So it is an area that, if you're interested in large systemic areas that need change, and applied data and applying sort of systems thinking to big problems. So different, not AI per se, but certainly a lot of crossover. And so I think for me, where the intersection sort of happened is thinking about this moment we're in, and sort of both the awesome potential that we have, but also the awesome responsibility that we have right now if we're alive and thinking about solving problems in this space. We have both of those things swirling in our minds. So we know we have massive problems that are systemic and sort of community-wide that aren't going to be solved under typical normal means. We haven't been able to solve them yet, and certainly access to healthcare is one of them, in public health that we think a lot about. But our company is focused on access to justice, which I would argue is a public health emergency in its own right. So I guess one way to think about, and this came up in the entrepreneurship panel earlier as well, that there isn't the necessity, you don't have to necessarily decide between doing good and doing well, right? Meaning that you can create companies, you can create initiatives, you can create businesses, let's be honest, that can help address some of these social issues. So just encourage people to think broadly, and AI brings in the type of moment that I think we've been waiting for a lot of these spaces to really finally start to transform, because the scale at which we can work independently or with small teams is vastly different. So for access to justice, one of the parts that we're working in is access to the law itself, which interestingly, some of the initiative for that actually came from Harvard. I can tell people about that later if you're interested, from Harvard Law School. But I do think it's just a moment where we can think in a very different scale than we've ever been able to before. So it's just a very interesting time to be a social entrepreneur, I would say.
Thank you so much for such an incredibly detailed response. And wow, that connection to public health is really, really inspiring. On the topic of using AI in managing businesses though, Francesca, how is IBM implementing AI governance to ensure ethical and responsible AI usage while balancing innovation, safety, and regulatory compliance?
Yes, so I use IBM as an example, but I think that in general a company should put together many different things, and at the level of the whole company, not inside one business unit, to make sure that the technology that it builds, that it delivers, that it deploys, or that it uses itself follows a responsible approach. So from first level, high level principles, to their implementation within the company, which includes even technology itself, so technological tools to check for bias, to mitigate it, but then the technological tools are kind of the easy part for a tech company. So it's not the most relevant and most difficult part. Then you have to put in place the right governance that has to be well integrated with all the other internal processes that the company has. So for example, tech companies are already used to have security by design, privacy by design, and then several years ago, we told teams to say, oh, now we have to do AI ethics by design, because you don't want AI ethics at the end of the life cycle, you want it at the beginning. But then we were not integrating it well enough, so really it was difficult for teams to adopt these new processes, so you need to have this integrated way of adding use case review processes and again guidelines for developers to build an AI ethics steps, technical or governance steps in the life cycle. And then governance also of, we have an internal responsible tech board that I co-chair that has representatives from all the business units. Everybody in IBM is educated, and education is one of the big enablers throughout the company around all the dimensions of AI ethics. Of course, AI ethics has a lot of things, including AI for social good and so on, and some of them are more relevant, some of them are less relevant for a company business model. So for example, IBM is not a social media platform model, for example, is not a generalist chatbot business model. IBM is a company that delivers AI solutions to other companies. Okay, so in that scenario, you have to understand what are the the most relevant issues around AI ethics, and then you address them at the company level. Of course, again, so technical tools, governance, but then also make sure that the governance is not interpreted as a checklist, but it is really, and this, you need to build the right culture in the company to understand, because without this culture of AI ethics, then you cannot make the right judgments, because these are not yes/no judgments. These are very nuanced situations, and you need people to be able to make nuanced judgments, you know, in these cases. So technology, governance, culture, and education, as I said, as a big enabler, but also another big enabler is in the same line as interdisciplinary work, is partnership with others. And some of the others may be other companies, but most of the others are others that are not companies, that bring a different perspective, civil society organization, ACLU, and so on. So we have partnership, academia as well, where we have to learn from the perspective of others, or listen to the perspective of others, and bring our own, what we learn internally, to help them understand what the challenges are inside the company and so on. So partnership are really very important.
Thank you so much for such a detailed and nuanced response to how these companies can embed ethics in AI from the start. I'm sure our future founders in the room will find that very useful. Okay, now to move on to some more general questions. Any of you guys, feel free to jump in if you find it a question that you think you have a great answer to. First, to start off, what are some of the biggest gaps you see today between AI ethics principles and how AI systems are actually built and deployed in the real world?
I'll jump in because I think, one of the things I'm seeing is actually the word ethics, because, sometimes I feel like we live in a world in which ethics is a nice to have, when in fact it is a must have. And so I try to include, when I say ethics, I also say safe, responsible, accountable, transparent, like all the things that I mean by ethics, because just the word ethics on its own can mean a whole host of things. But to me, the gap is around the fact that safety, responsibility, ethical use is not in every phase of the development. So to be brief, I was an engineer, so I think about design, develop, deploy, right? But with AI, and it needs to be, when those considerations need to take place at the design, development, and deployment phase. What are you designing for? What are you optimizing for? In development, you need to know that you're using the right model for the right problem set. Don't use LLMs to do visual recognition, that kind of thing. And deploy is really around where is it going to be used, how is it going to be used, and also are your people trained, right? But there are two other elements, conveniently also D's, data. Where did this data come from? And how balanced is it, and actually did you have the rights to it? And at the end, or throughout, is also decision. And this is the one that I'm most concerned about, because it is about, is there a human in the loop, or is this an autonomous decision-making deployment? And if so, are we ceding our agency to it? And so when the map applications first came out, it was not always correct, and so people were driving into ditches, even though they could see there's a ditch right there. But the computer told them to make a left, and they did, and they ended up in a ditch. And so think about that with the type of decision systems that we're developing now, and we're letting computers make decisions, even if we could see with our eyes that there's a ditch there. So decision is really around, in the use of AI, how are we assuring that we're not ceding complete agency to these agents?
I can add that what I see sometimes missing in companies is, well, this idea of the integrated governance that I mentioned already. Usually some companies may sign these high-level principles, and then they build these checklists. And then they say, okay, you have to comply to this checklist, and that's it. So they fail to see that you need much more than that. And also, I think that they feel, well, first of all, I completely agree about AI ethics. I like that term for many years, but recently even our internal board that was called the AI ethics board, now is called the responsible technology board. And the reason is that not for the people that work in AI ethics, but for other people, ethics seems like something very vague. That is not linked, connected to their everyday job, no? So and also sometimes AI ethics may give the impression that is the ethics of the technology, which of course is not. It's the ethics of everybody around the technology, the whole human ecosystem around the technology. So I think that responsible AI approach is a better way of saying the things. But then another thing that I really see missing in many companies is the awareness that addressing well these AI ethics issues is what makes the company more successful. And they instead see AI ethics mitigation as slowing down the delivery or the innovation that they can build. And so they see it as antagonist to the success of the company, rather than seeing AI ethics, a responsible approach to AI going in the same direction as the success of the company. So, and I think that usually, for example, there is a risk-based approach to responsible AI, but companies interpret the risk-based approach as risks to the company, not risks to people, to communities, to environment and so on. No, risk to the company. Am I risking to pay some fine because of regulation? Am I risking to lose some clients? Am I risking to my reputation? Risking to the company. So, which I think it should not be the goal, but it should be the consequence. So avoiding those risks to the company should be the consequence of the fact that the company addresses the risk, the external risk in some sense, which is the real risk to all of us. Right?
Yeah, and I would just say AI, the whole term, it's an interesting point to discuss the term and what does it mean, because it can mean so many different things. Ethical uses of the AI, like the teams are building ethically, but the bigger issue that I find very interesting that I don't hear grappled with quite as often is sort of the ethics of the larger transformation we're in generally, in that what are we building for? What are we optimizing for? And every company, of course, is going to be, including mine, are optimizing for things that relate to their company and their company's success or what have you. But if we think about this as a societal change and a moment of huge societal change, what are the ethics of the larger societal question we're having? If we are going to be displacing large numbers of workers, is this a time to talk about universal guaranteed income or other things like that at a very high meta level? So when I start to think about the ethics, I can go down quite a rabbit hole in my mind about this larger societal questions, which I see brought up here and there, but not too often. So when the original question was, what are things not being built for right now, or what are we not seeing being built for? I do think that's one thing that worries me a little bit, is that if we're only being driven by, sort of capitalistic thinking, which is of course normal for an entrepreneurship conference, but how do we think about making sure we're not only optimizing for individual sort of stock prices going up? So anyway.
What an interesting conversation, I'll make note to rename the panel next year.
Exactly.
Moving on, given the increasing use of AI across all sectors, what role should diverse voices, especially women, play in shaping responsible AI ethics, whatever you want to call it, to ensure systems are designed in ways that benefit and ensure fairness for everyone?
I mean, if you don't have diverse voices building it, it won't solve diverse problems out in the world. I mean, so that's a problem we've already seen. We've talked about is that the data that went in, the way it was built, and who built it has already shaped biases that are baked into the system. So I'm sure these two are on the technical side more than I am. They could speak to that better than I could. But I think the risk is you're constantly reinforcing sort of societal gaps if you don't address it in a more intentional way. So we can't be surprised if the outcomes are the same as what we've always had if we don't intentionally change who's part of the process. So.
Yeah, and I think that, of course, diversity in general, as you said, I mean, is very important because AI will shape the distribution of opportunities and power. You know? And so if you don't have diverse voices in that shaping that technology, then this distribution of opportunities will not be inclusive. And will distribute opportunities only to some part of humanity and not all of it. But I think that I think that women, women or other, let's say, vulnerable or marginalized communities experience firsthand some bias in their, in their everyday. Work that they do and is given for granted and is not paid, like at home. So they experience this, or not being listened enough in a room. Even today, during my mentoring session, there was a student who told me, well, usually in my class, they're mostly boys, and when I speak up, they tend to not listen to me. So you see, even starting from being when you're young and continuing, you may be fortunate enough to not really be discriminated, but still you feel these things here and there in your life. So you as women, we are more careful in pointing out things that are not really done in the right way. They're not inclusive enough. Not compared to men, but compared to people that did not experience firsthand this kind of bias or not inclusivity or not diversity and so on. So I think we can play a very important role in making sure that this technology that again will shape the future opportunities for everybody is really built to benefit everybody.
Yeah, I mean, to wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said. As a technologist who started 40 years ago, the number of women in computer science has actually gone down and flattened out since the 80s. I find this deeply, I thought it was gonna go up, and, both working in finance and in deep technology companies, I was once in a situation where, someone came up to me and said, you're the most senior woman in our group. And then someone else said, you're the only senior woman in this building. So I had the bathrooms to myself. I never had to wait in line. Many stalls to choose from. But no, kidding aside, I think, what's important, and this is not to dissuade anyone from going, it's actually showing this really gaping need to make sure that we are very purposeful and mindful in increasing the diversity of the people that make the technology, that design the technology, that use the technology, because otherwise, and it's been shown, we're going to have systems that were designed and embedded with, only a single point of view. So, and I guess, can't stress enough that, your voice is important. Don't stay silent, and don't take it personally, actually. I used to give an exercise to my engineers, most of whom were men, because I couldn't find any, to hire. And I would say to them, imagine you went to a conference, a tech conference, and close your eyes. Now imagine you were the only man there, right? You would think, am I in the right place? Am I even in the right occupation? And I said, that's how your female colleagues feel. So just keep that in mind, and and make sure that you're not just imposing your point of view, and make sure that, so part of my strategy was also to teach my male colleagues how I wanted to be treated. And just, and seems to work, so we'll see. But, it's such a rewarding and incredibly impactful career. I highly recommend it. There's ups and downs with any career, but this is one that really, really, first of all, we just need more engineers in this country. We just really do. We don't have enough. We don't have enough of a pipeline. And second, so we can't just discount half of the population that can't do this job. That's just not going to work for anybody. And I think there's a lot of support to make sure that we have grown enough. There's so many amazing advances that are coming down the pike if we just have folks like you who are the future of innovation in medicine, in science, in technology. Just keep at it.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful and inspiring and vulnerable answers. I'm sure all our women in the audience are just as inspired as I am by their candor. Moving on to the million-dollar question in these types of conversations. When an AI system causes harm or makes a serious mistake, who should be held accountable? The developer, the company, leadership, or the system itself? How should students think of this question and reflect on this question as future builders?
I can start. Definitely not the AI. AI has no intention, has no moral status, so it's not the AI system. So people that say it's the AI that had to be accountable, it means that they want to give their responsibility away. So it's not the AI system. I would say that if you think about the developers of an AI system, I would say rarely the developers. Unless the developers really doesn't follow some guidelines that has been given, doesn't look at all the risk that he should look at, or intentionally bypasses some guardrails, then it's not the responsibility of the developers. If it does everything according to the best practices and still the AI makes a mistake, it's not because the developers had intentionally put a mistake. Also, all the more advanced AI systems are based on statistics, so they always have an error rate. LLMs not always, but sometimes hallucinate, so that is the way they're built. And until we come up with the different techniques, then they are going to be like that. So developers only when they intentionally do not follow the best practices that have been, they've been educated to follow. Companies, yes, the leadership, yes. For example, the leadership in a company, if they don't give the right incentives, they say that the most incentive is to be fast in delivering, then they just kind of push the developers to bypass things, guardrails and additional steps. So yes, the leadership can be responsible and the organization can be responsible if it doesn't put in place the right governance, the right help for these developers to test and do the things that need to be done, and the right incentives. But I think that, again, whether now moving a little bit beyond like making a mistake about whether AI is used in a responsible or in a beneficial way, is also each of us. We have to have a culture of what does it mean for us to use AI tools in a good way for us. Like, is it good to scroll all the time, many hours, or is it good for us, for our community, for our interpersonal relationship, and so on? So to get into a frame of mind that we are also responsible to make sure that we all use AI in the most responsible way.
I completely agree. I think the short answer is it's up to us. You can't throw an algorithm in jail. So, but the person that wrote that virus that stole your bank information, that's the person that goes to jail. You don't throw the virus in jail. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, there's always sort of a combination of effects with any technology. There's, something is put out, whether it's a food or, a new product of some kind, and then it harms somebody and there's a lawsuit, and then usually followed by regulation. That's been the pattern forever. And so, I think, what you cannot anticipate every possible thing. First people invented cars, and then the seat belts came later, right? So, and that's only after people were killed, right? So, you can't just be in total paralysis. You can try to think about what could go wrong and have that as part of your discipline. But then also there are going to be, there are some bad actors, to my reference about viruses, and there's also things that are optimized for ad serving and not education, right? So, there's some obvious things that you can look at, but ultimately the accountability is with the people themselves, and I think over time we will be able to, there will be lawsuits, there are a few going around right now, followed by regulations, and that's sort of the cycle of life.
Yeah, and one other way to think about it, and this is a very active conversation happening in the legal space right now, and it goes back to public health again in the concept of harm reduction, right? So when we think about people who don't have access to an attorney right now, I mean, that's a very serious problem for them. And one of the statistics I use just to visualize, if you took Fenway Park, which if you're from Boston, is our baseball stadium, and you filled that up with people that had a need for a legal aid attorney. Legal aid attorneys are people who work with people that are under the poverty line. There'd be 10 attorneys to help all those people. So imagine if all those people had a need, that's all there would be available. So there's this vast need. So one of the arguments that's pretty interesting actually is some help, even if it's AI based instead of a human, better? Does that reduce the harm? Than nothing. And so it's very interesting. And then the idea also of humans get things wrong. Humans hallucinate, right, and make up facts or, misconnect things in a way that isn't right, and they also have their own biases. So I'm in agreement we can't get paralyzed, but also are some of the systems we design better than what the humans can provide? And that's a really tricky one to figure out, and it probably depends. Like you don't want to take the risk of a high error rate in mammography or something like that, like that's unacceptable. But in some areas, maybe some of the error rate is okay because the outcomes aren't as dire. But it's a very active and very interesting conversation, and you all can be a huge part of where that goes. So.
Once again, thank you so much for such thoughtful and detailed responses and this productive conversation that's being had. To transition to our final question before we open up to the floor. In the conversation with AI, there's so much talk about how it can be used to foster innovation, to further innovation, to make innovation, to expand innovation beyond just basic human capabilities. But how can companies, startup founders, builders embed these ethical considerations of AI into AI development without sacrificing innovation?
Yeah, as I said, I think in my view, adding steps to the design and development phase that try to address these AI ethics issues can be seen by somebody as slowing down if the goal is to deliver, to get to the end of that process fast. But the goal should not be that one. The goal is to build innovation that is robust, that is safe. I want to go back to the analogy with the cars, that is used, because I think it's a very good analogy here. Not just for the safety belts that, of course, are making cars more safe to use, but even the traffic rules, the rules for traffic that we all obey when we are in the street, when we drive with our car, traffic lights, stop sign, and everything else, the lanes and so on, a traffic light, somebody could think, oh, it slows me down because it makes me stop. But in fact, these rules allow us to go faster with our car, but in a safe way. Because when the traffic light is green, you know that nobody else is going to, so you can go faster within the speed limit, because you don't have to look around. You know that most probably nobody else is going to come in a different direction. So just like that, this embedding AI governance or ethics issues mitigation into the life cycle of building an AI solution cannot be interpreted as slowing down innovation, but really as making innovation robust and more stable, more safe, and also sometimes it even saves you spending much more time later, because if you figure out too late that piece of innovation is not safe and is not acceptable by society and nobody wants to buy it, then you have to redo from scratch. So you see that really should not be interpreted as slowing down innovation, and so embedding AI governance is really the way to make innovation faster and safer at the same time.
Yeah, I think, I think that ethics versus innovation is sometimes a false dichotomy that is set up so that you could ignore the ethics part in order to justify the innovation. Yeah. I see that as a very specious argument in many of the conversations I have. Yeah. Nobody calls them traffic ethics, right?
Good point.
So, I think what we want to think about is what is effective? What are the outcomes we're getting? Some people still don't like speed limits, but especially in cities. They were just lowered in London, and some people really hate that. But guess what? Fewer cyclists are killed as a result, because when they made those original speed limits, there weren't as many cyclists, right? And so, they also change over time, is what I would say as well, and they have to be looked at every few years to say, are these still the right rules? So I think that it is part and parcel of innovation and not in opposition to it.
Right. And the fact that you're here listening to this panel, I think it already puts you ahead of the game, because I do think that people who think about this and not thinking about the trade-off are going to be the ones who are sort of winning in the long run, because as we know, what everyone is going to listen to is what the market says, and if the market demands more ethical, more purpose-built, safe tools, those will be the companies that do well. So I think it's great that you're here and thinking about it. That means you've already got a leg up on some of the competition, to be honest, if you think about it in a holistic way. So good for you.
All right, amazing. Okay, at this point, we're going to transition to being able to take some questions from the audience. Okay, awesome.
You have a microphone?
You're giving me extra time to think of really good questions.
Just so that the mic stays up there, do you guys mind projecting your questions just so that they can hear you and then they can respond?
Oh, try standing up.
Hi, my name is Pragya. I'm a computer science student. I heard a lot of conversation during the panel today about you guys talking about regulations. So I know there are currently some there, like the GDPR, the CCPA, and now that almost all companies are going to use AI in some form. Do you think such regulations help, or do they just become like compliance overheads?
So I can start because I know well the European landscape around regulation in AI, which is of course very different from the US or other regions of the world. And in some sense, having a regulation, of course, is useful because it puts, it sets the rules of the game for everybody the same. But it can be a way for companies to move to a passive approach, saying, "Wait, tell me what I have to be compliant with, and I will do everything that I need to do to be compliant." And then it doesn't push company to think about their own values, principles, implementations, and so on. So it can transform companies from proactive to passive compliance, checks. But another thing that has to be said about regulation is that it shows exactly the discussion and the approval and all the timeline, for example, of the GDPR, but also the European AI Act. It shows that regulations, we cannot just rely on regulation because regulation cycle is too slow for the technology, for the AI technology. The European AI Act was first released in its draft in 2021. Then it took more than 2 years to be discussed and then to be approved. And still some parts are not having effect. So in 2021, there was not even any large language model, okay? So you see that that's why what we said earlier, we all have a shared responsibility here, and we cannot just rely on regulation. Again, regulation have to be done in a way that is so-called future-proof, because if they link too much to a specific technology of that time, then they become obsolete very soon. Of course, the GDPR is a different one because it's about privacy, the rights of the data, the person releasing their data, and again, it's in Europe. Similar ones are somewhere or some other place in the world. But it's very scattered thing. But I agree with you that regulation can have the danger of introducing checklists more than a very, proactive governance.
Yeah, I think regulation has an important role in protecting the consumer. As I said, it lags behind harms, lawsuits, and then regulation, so it is always behind a technology. But, having come from a highly regulated industry in finance, what I often see missing from AI regulation is the notion of enforcement and detection. So where is the SEC of AI? There isn't one. So you can have all the regulations, but then who's actually going to enforce it, right? So, and what's the punishment, and what's going to happen, and so I think we're very early stage. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying let's think this through. I personally believe there's a lot of existing regulations that cover the disciplines that already exist. So, whether they're done by people or AI, it doesn't matter. We have a lot of regulations already. I can tell you as a former, fintech person, there's a lot already. So whether you use AI to do it, doesn't matter. It's still against the rules, right? So I think, let's think this through. It has a very important role to play, but it's not a reason not to do something, and again, you can't use it as an excuse to go around them.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add except for to say, like, a world with this big of a change and this big of a technology that isn't regulated scares me a lot. But on the other hand, I think the point that the cycle of government is just too slow to keep up with this is a hugely important piece. So again, maybe it's back to the consumer being, consumers have probably the most power collectively of anybody. It's just, how do we use that in a way that affects change is tough, but yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for the panel. Besides regulations, what are some ways to build this sense of responsibility and culture inside a company to promote AI ethics?
Yeah, well, okay, as I said, education is very important. So, like, even in the in every company has these business conduct guidelines, and there is a course that we have to take every start of the year, everybody in the company, And even in that business conduct guidelines, now there is a module around AI ethics. So it's not just for the technical part of the company, but it's also for everybody else, even people that are not technical at all. So that is just a small thing to help everybody get into this mind or frame of mind that there is bias in the technology, that you can impact on the privacy, that you can be not inclusive, and so on. But then you have also, a lot of education modules, so-called badges that you can get within a company to help, go deeper into understanding these issues. And even for the technical people, the developers, it's not really easy. It was not natural at first to understand, for example, what this bias is. What is bias, Like there was a team that we did a pilot with a team several years ago that thought that if their project did not have any protected variable, like related to people, like race, gender, age, then bias issue was not touching them, so they didn't have to do anything about bias. So they were not aware that you can have other variables that are not related to people, like the zip code, that is a proxy for some protected variables, that so can put bias in the project, even if there is no protected variable really explicitly there. So they didn't know. It's not that they wanted their project to be biased, they just didn't know. And so they needed to be aware, because those developers were trained when AI was doing things differently. It was not using machine learning, for example. So they didn't even know that there was this concept, and so they needed help. So those are the things that inside the company you need to do to help. And another thing is that these teams were not used to think about the impact on the impacted communities or people. And so they needed help to understand, okay, well, what would the user think? Not really the user, the impacted communities think about the deployment of this solution. So that is another conversation that they were not used to do. They were just talking among themselves, and that's it.
So, absolutely right. I think, culture and people are so important, employee training, things like that. Organizations, whether they be companies, nonprofits, political parties, whatever, they need to be really clear what their values are. And then from there, instill, the how to get there, right? And what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So, I was in an organization where, we had to shift from your goal is to get the biggest sales number, right? And so everybody was optimizing for that, right? And yet it turned out, well, some people were doing it at the detriment of their teammates, right? So then we wanted to shift the values to be more team-oriented. So we changed the performance goals to include team, sales, not just individual sales. So you notice these things, and so you can do that same process with responsible and ethical AI. And I think we're all feeling this out, but if any of you have, there's a company that makes one of the big large language models, but if you apply for a job on their website, you have to sign a thing that says you did not use AI to write your cover letter or resume, which I found really, I was like, huh? Like, aren't you the guys that created the thing that was supposed to, so it's certainly, even for the companies that make the LLMs, they're still dealing with, but we want to, and I did ask them, I know someone there, and I said, why do you have that? And they said, because we hire people, not robots. So, so I thought that was fascinating, and this is from one of the big makers of, an LLM. So, I think we're all feeling out what is this culture, and to also focus, this is just my personal soapbox, which I think is demonstrated by the example I just gave, which is, it's a culture of innovation and a culture of ethics, but truly what its base is a culture of humanity. You know, I'm a pro-human, so stop me there.
Hi, I'm Anna. I really enjoyed a lot of the topics you guys were touching on. So it's interesting because we're seeing a lot of women actually not use LLMs, and like there's that gender gap between men and women using LLMs.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm at a tough place as a student because I try to not use it because I want to learn how to do the stuff and have it instead of having it just tell me the answer, and also just the environmental impacts.
Yeah.
But then we also know that the LLMs are biased sometimes in their responses to women.
Yeah.
So now my question is like, what are your guys' thoughts on like trying to maybe not use AI and LLMs, but then not falling behind and not getting pushed out of the room because you're a woman?
Yeah, that is such a tricky one, right? And this is such a non sequitur, but one of my LLMs recently started to telling me to take a deep breath and calm down when I was asking it questions, and I was like, where is that coming from, right? So anyway, I was like, literally, you're telling me to like stop being dramatic. It's like, ah. Anyway, so yeah, so I get that, and the idea of like you don't want to rely on it makes a lot of sense, but in terms of career trajectory and all that, like women have to, like, not to use this phrase, but they have to lean in, and they do have to know this stuff. Even if you have a skepticism about it, it's healthy to have that, but the gap is worrisome. And if people don't know what she was referring to, is that there is a gap, you know, in how women are using and learning to use these tools compared to men. And so just from a practical perspective, we don't want to fall even further behind, right? So even if it makes us uncomfortable or we're not sure we really like what's happening, and the environmental stuff is extremely important, that's a whole separate conversation, right? But people are inventing other ways that are better tools for not quite as environmentally dangerous. But I don't know what the other panelists think, but I think we kind of we have no choice. I think opting out is a really almost a non-starter for women in the workplace now.
If you think about the use of LLM for coding, I would definitely use them. Use them to, but you have to check, be the governance, be the human governance for the coding that the LLM is able to do. So that means that you need to be able to know what it means to code in a safe and correct way something in order to check that what they produce is correct or needs to be changed. But definitely it accelerates and simplifies and allows you to do many more things that you could do without their help. In terms of interaction, I mean, I use LLM many times to think through some topic, think through and clarify my ideas about something. And in that case, they are also very useful in that case as well, but I need to force myself in being innovative, because otherwise there is the tendency of okay, he's telling me these things. Yes, it can tell me things that maybe I didn't think about, but then I tend to become lazy if I'm not careful, right, and then get what they give, which is useful, but then I feel that I become less creative and less innovative in whatever point of view that I want to reason about. So I think that again, they're very useful in many of these activities, content creation, but we have to be aware of our tendency of delegating maybe too much, because that would make us useless. Because if we are not innovative, if we are not creative, what are, and then there's no use for us. So not only because it's bad for our career, but also because it's bad for us. What kind of satisfaction do you get if instead of writing an essay yourself or in collaboration with it, you let it write to an entity, so it's not even satisfactory for yourself, besides the effect on the career and yeah.
Okay, we have time for about one more question. Okay.
To audit which systems?
So the systems that we are trying to build at hackathons, or like the projects that we are trying to build, is there any framework we can use to make sure our models are not biased? Like a very lightweight framework.
Well, there are a lot of benchmarks that are available and that many LLM builders are using to even compare the performance over these benchmarks of the different LLMs, I think. And then there are also these red teaming, processes where a different team, checks and the vulnerabilities of an LLM or whatever you can build. So I think that these two are ways that companies, developers can test and even show, usually hopefully in a transparent way, what's the behavior of an LLM.
Yeah, I love that phrase because I think of myself as like the global red team. That's when I use the LMs, I'm doing it in a very critical way. Did it give me the right answer? Can I make it do wrong things? And then I report those bugs, right? And so I'm just like a red team by nature.
And another thing that we can add is that recently there is a prompt that is on social media, at least on my view of social media, is kind of viral, that shows that LLMs really are extremely good at doing certain things, responding to certain questions, but then they miss common sense reasoning, very basic common sense reasoning. So this prompt says, I have to wash my car, and the car wash is 100 yards away. Should I drive there or should I walk there? You can try any LLM. I tried with ChatGPT 5.2. It tells you you have to walk there. Definitely walk there. It doesn't understand that if you walk there without your car, you're not going to be able to wash your car. So you see this common sense reasoning, very basic things. And this is why are the LLM not able to do that? Even if the same LLM can solve complex, Olympiad, math level problems, is because nobody wrote that thing on the web. No human would write that thing because it's so obvious to us. So if we continue building LLMs with the same technique, just learning from all the text that is on the web, then this will continue. No? So when we use LLM, really we have to be aware of what is still missing in the way that they're built, not because somebody made a mistake in building them.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for questions, but can I get one last final huge round of applause for all of this? Once again, thank you for joining us. You guys are ahead of the curve. This is going to be the location where our keynote speaker will be speaking at too. So, you can always feel free to step outside, take a little break, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to WECode 2026. Really happy to have you here. How are we feeling? Can I get some cheers? Yes, second keynote of the day. So if you haven't met me already, my name is Nabiha. I'm an Associate Director of Programming here, and I will be doing the keynote for this event. Very happy to have you here. Thank you. So our theme this year invites us to think about what lies beyond the frame, beyond the assumptions placed on us, beyond traditional career paths, and beyond the limits we sometimes internalize about what is possible. In industries like technology and finance, those frames can be especially rigid. Who builds the systems? Who manages capital? Who leads institutions? Who gets to shape the future? This evening's keynote speaker did not succeed within those systems. She expanded them. Dr. Sylvia Kwan is the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Ellevest, where she leads more than $1 billion in assets under the management and continues to redefine what wealth management can look like for women, their families, the next generation, and institutions. With degrees in computer science and applied math from Brown University and a master's and PhD in engineering economic systems from Stanford, she built her foundation in deep technical rigor. She went on to hold senior leadership roles at firms like Charles Schwab and Financial Engines, scaling investment systems around billions in assets. But what makes Dr. Kwan a true category creator is this. She asked a question others weren't asking. What if gender-neutral financial models were not actually neutral at all? As a founding leader at Ellevest, she developed the industry's first gender-aware investing algorithm, challenging long-standing defaults in finance and creating a new framework designed around women's lived realities. In early 2025, she stepped into the role of CEO during a pivotal moment for the company, of transformation for the company, guiding it through a strategic shift while strengthening its financial foundation and staying rooted to its mission. Most recently, she introduced the idea of wealth care, encouraging us to not only think about return on investment, but also return on life. Her journey is a powerful example of what happens when technical excellence meets courage, vision, and a refusal to accept inherited constraints. This evening, she will share her career journey, how she identified overlooked gaps to become a category creator, and why how we see ourselves does not have to be confined by how the world first sees us. Please join me in giving a warm WECode welcome to Dr. Sylvia Kwan.
Thank you for that kind introduction. So during my junior year in college, I traveled halfway across the world to study in Hong Kong, just so that I could blend in, and for the very first time, be part of the majority. But the more I tried to blend in, the more I stood out. Coming back from Hong Kong to my senior year, I was about to graduate with a hard-earned degree in computer science and applied math. And I was ready to embark on my career as a software engineer in technology. I was thrilled to get several great job offers, but at the very last minute, I turned them all down. Fast forward a few decades later, on a Friday night, the co-founder of Ellevest called me to tell me that she needed to step down from her day-to-day role as CEO. And would I step up to lead the company? I almost walked away. Looking back on my career journey, I recognize, of course, only with the benefit of hindsight, those pivotal moments where the script that I wrote for myself got flipped. Times when someone saw me differently, times when I reached beyond the frame that I created for myself. And these were moments that profoundly changed my career journey. So I grew up in Southern California as the daughter of Chinese immigrants. And like many kids of Asian immigrants, I see a lot of Asian faces out there, so I think you know what I'm talking about. But I got the same messages over and over again. Work hard, study hard, keep your head down, be humble, speak quietly, if not at all, and above all, don't stand out and don't draw attention to yourself. And let me tell you, I excelled at following these rules. Report card after report card said, Sylvia is a very good student, but she is so shy and so quiet. So from a very young age, I already felt that I was more of a follower, not so much a leader. But I thought that maybe I should try. So in the 6th grade, I had a crazy idea that I could somehow magically transform myself into a leader by running for student body office. And so I made some posters and I created some clever slogans. But when it came down to voting day, I shrunk back into my script. I'm a follower, not a leader, and I didn't even vote for myself. Obviously, I did not win. So that script, kind of the way that I saw myself, my own truth, stayed with me all through grade school, really up through junior year in college, until I decided to study abroad my junior year, the 2nd semester. And while a lot of my classmates were jet-setting off to London or some other European city, I decided I would go to Hong Kong and study at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So I had imagined that I would finally be in a place where I would feel comfortable in my own skin, blending in a place where everyone looked just like me. So in one of the classes that I was taking, we were all split up. The class was split up into teams to work on a big project, and the project was going to be the entire grade for the class. And so every group had to choose who would be the leader of the group. And as always, I had no intention of raising my hand for the job. So our team kind of huddled together and trying to decide who was going to lead the group, and I'm looking at everybody else, expecting someone's going to raise their hand, or several people will raise their hand, and we'll have to decide who's going to do it. So much to my utter surprise and total dismay, all of the eyes were looking back at me. So my project mates, who were all local Hong Kong students, decided that I was the obvious choice to lead the group. And I protested. No, you don't understand. Like, I'm not the type of person who leads. But in that context, in that place in Hong Kong, where I thought I was blending in, my classmates perceived me very differently. In their eyes, I wasn't Chinese. I was American, born in a country of leaders, a place where people are bold and fearless. And at that moment, something within me flipped. I saw myself reflected through my classmates' eyes. They didn't know that shy person inside me, the person who didn't even have the confidence to vote for herself in 6th grade. They saw me as someone who could lead. That experience turned out to be a pivotal moment for me. It showed me that the way that we see ourselves is not the only way to be seen. Sometimes the world reflects something back to you that you didn't even know was there. I could step out of the frame that I had created for myself. I didn't have to be defined by my shyness, my culture, my self-doubt, and really none of us do. We all have stories that we've told ourselves about what we're good at, what we're not, where we belong, where we don't. But these are just stories, stories that can be rewritten. And rewriting these stories is exactly why we are here today. So I want to thank the Harvard WECode team for inviting me to this stage, fostering this powerful community, organizing such an uplifting conference where we can challenge our own narratives. So coming back to Hong Kong for my senior year, I was about to graduate with a computer science and applied math degree. I worked hard those 4 years. I was thrilled to get several job offers from great technology companies that I thought was really going to jumpstart my career. But my experience in Hong Kong kind of cracked the frame that I had created for myself. And yes, I could move forward in the tech career that I had envisioned, but maybe could there be another way for me to use my skill set and explore something else? My time abroad had actually widened the aperture of my lens. And looking through the lens, I had a clear vision of a career in technology, but there were some fuzzy images kind of around the edges that felt, I don't know, uncertain, but at the same time intriguing. So what did I do? Well, a month before graduation, I said no to all of the job offers and yes to exploring what was beyond the frame. At this point, as you can imagine, time was not on my side. And I interviewed with any company who came to campus who would give me an interview. And I ended up getting hired at an investment bank, actually right across the river in downtown Boston. My parents were much relieved. After about a year and change at the bank, I landed a position as a junior portfolio manager at the firm's quantitative investment division. And that was the start of my decades-long career in financial services. So by now, you might be thinking, wow, she just wasted 4 years of a computer science study. And that's definitely what I thought when I turned down those job offers during my senior year. But after decades of being in the finance industry, I realized that a technology background is by far the most versatile skill set, regardless of where your career journey takes you. It is truly the liberal arts degree of the 21st century. The ability to combine quantitative analytical rigor with critical problem solving is the foundation for a successful career in any industry. So if you think about it, financial technology, fintech, wasn't even a thing when I started my career. But today, there's not only fintech, there's health tech, there's legal tech, there's ag tech, prop tech. List goes on and on. So yes, I used my quant background when I was at the bank. But little did I know how useful my background would be when I joined my first fintech company in the late 90s called Financial Engines. Today, Financial Engines is one of the most successful fintech or even financial firms in the US, managing over $300 billion. So one of the co-founders of Financial Engines was William Sharpe, Nobel Prize winner of economics in 1990. So I don't know if any of you are finance enthusiasts out there, but that name might sound familiar. This is the same William Sharpe of the Sharpe ratio, which is a commonly used metric in the investment world. So when I was pursuing my doctorate at Stanford, I was extremely lucky to have Dr. Sharpe on my dissertation committee. And I remember spending so many hours preparing for my dissertation defense. There was a lot on the line for me. I felt like I spent 6 really tough years studying hard, preparing for this dissertation defense, and I just wanted to graduate and be done. So I passed. I passed my dissertation defense, and I was elated. But what came after was some advice that I never expected. After my defense, Dr. Sharpe pulled me aside, and he said, "Sylvia, don't confine yourself to the back office. While that might be where you are most comfortable, you need to be at the front. You have a talent for communicating, and you need to be externally facing." And I remember thinking at the time, like, are you sure? Are you talking about me? Because that's not the way I saw myself. But Dr. Sharpe's advice has stayed with me to this day. And since that time, I have constantly worked to internalize his advice. Seeing myself differently, especially through the eyes of a Nobel Prize winner, has driven me to practice and continuously improve on how I can continue to communicate complex topics in a relatable and practical way. Having others reflect back a different version of yourself can be empowering. But it's not something that happens overnight. In fact, for me, reaching beyond that frame is something that I had to learn over and over again. So in December of 2024, on a Friday night, I was flying home to San Francisco, actually from Boston, when my boss and LFS founder Wall Street veteran Sally Krawcheck texted asking to speak. Now, Sally had shared a health diagnosis with me earlier in the year, but she assured me that, hey, we've got time to figure it out down the road. So when we spoke late that Friday night, I was stunned when she told me she needed to step down immediately from her day-to-day role as CEO. She needed to focus on her health. And not only that, Sylvia, would you step up to lead Elevest? And oh, I need you to start on Monday. When I joined Elevest as its chief investment officer more than 10 years ago, I made it clear to Sally that I had no desire to be CEO ever, full stop. I love investing. That's the career I chose for myself. I'm happy to be on the leadership team, do all the things, but I never ever want to be the person where the buck stops. I excel at being the best supporting actress, on the stage, but just not in the spotlight. So in this moment, I had to decide, and I had to decide fast. Would I stick to my script, I'm not a leader script, or could I go beyond the frame and embrace a new role that I never envisioned or wanted for myself? This time, there was no time to prepare, no time to second guess, no time to think about, was I even qualified for this role? So I said yes, and that was more than a year ago. Although Sally needed to step down, Elevest needed to keep moving forward and grow, because the work of serving women, getting more money into the hands of women, was far from done. And I felt a profound responsibility and a desire to keep building on the only by women for women financial services company committed to helping women plan and invest to achieve and grow wealth. I knew that Elevest was not only important to me, but equally important to the Elevest community that we had worked so hard to build. So it's been a very steep learning curve for me over the last year. Navigating a lot of transitions, a lot of challenges, unexpected surprises, twists and turns. I had to ramp up very fast on the company financials, figure out how to navigate our board, take care of administrative issues, and I never had to think about before. But because the mission of Elevest and serving women is so important to me, I embraced this role that I swore I'd never take. The script that I wrote for myself had to change again to make room for a new one. So outdated scripts and perceptions can not only hold us back in our career journey, but old scripts can also keep women on the sidelines when it comes to investing and engaging with our finances. Too often, we get messages from a very young age that girls aren't good at math. Clearly, this room proves that couldn't be farther from the truth. Money isn't feminine. Women aren't risk takers. Women spend too much on shoes, lattes. That's why we're not rich. But money is power, and without economic equality, there is no true equality. So don't let the scripts that society or the media has written for us women stop you from fully engaging and taking care of yourself financially. Only with a strong financial foundation can you step out of other frames to try new ones. So every day at Elevest, we are working to change this money script for women. Money is the power to create change. We at Elevest want all women to recognize the power of their capital regardless of the amount, and to help them employ that capital intentionally. So women are set to control more than 2/3 of the household wealth in the US by 2030. This is through the great wealth transfer that is already underway. So imagine all of the shifts that could occur if women embrace their economic power to create the change that we want to see. Each of us has perceptions, expectations of who we are, what we believe we can become, what we're capable of. And sometimes how we see ourselves are influenced by other people, by the media, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. But whatever script that is can be rewritten. How we see ourselves is not the only way to be seen. You can choose to see yourself differently and imagine other ways to be seen. The unlearning, however, and the relearning that comes with changing your scripts isn't going to be linear. No one's going to tell you when it's time to reach up or stretch forward, when it's time to go beyond the frame that you created for yourself. If it were only that easy, but only you can decide that for yourself. The idea of stepping off a familiar, comfortable path is definitely exciting, but it's also messy, and it also can be terrifying, because you don't know where the path is going to lead you, you don't know how long it's going to take, and you don't know whether you're going to go straight into a dead end. But as you leave this conference and you go back to your schools, your labs, your classrooms, your startups, remember that you are the lead architect of your own story. Don't wait for someone else to hand you the pen. And for heaven's sake, don't ever forget to vote for yourself. Should I sit here? I'll sit here.
Before we move on to the fireside chat portion, could we please get another round of applause for Sylvia's amazing speech? So I know Elvest has been a really big part of your journey, and it's redefining how women have invested over the past decade. So looking back on your 10+ year leadership at Elvest, what principles or values have guided you the most in staying true to that mission while growing the company?
So what I've learned over the last 10 years is when you say something is for women, people automatically think it's junior varsity or somehow inferior. And I can't tell you how much that drives me crazy. Why can't it possibly be better? So that has kind of been driving me to how do we change that kind of perception? And I know where a lot of that perception comes from. There have been, so while we are the only financial services that was really built from the ground up for women, there have been hundreds of respected, fantastic investment firms that have women's initiatives inside them. This has been going on for decades, well before Elevest was founded. But clearly it has not worked, because women are still sitting on the sidelines when it comes to investing. And I believe the reason why it hasn't worked is this whole shrink it and pink it type of mentality. We're just going to take what we have today, which actually was built for a man. There was a really interesting survey where they surveyed, I don't know how many hundreds of asset managers, and asked them the question, who are you creating your products and services for? And 86% of them admitted their default was a man. So they take what they built for a man and then basically shrink it and pink it. And so what does that mean? Means same product, but they try to envision what a woman would like. And so maybe you get invited to a wine hour or something like that. And so it gives this perception that somehow it's dumbed down for women. And so trying to fight that perception is something that definitely keeps me driven at Elevest, to really show that, hey, what we're building here at Elevest, even though it is intended 100% to meet the needs of women, it is robust, it is rigorous, and just as good, if not better, in my opinion, than what's out there.
Thank you so much for your insight. I know a lot of students here may be interested in fintech, impact-driven like investing, or just any field that they want to make a difference in. Based on your experience, what mindset or habits do you think are the most important for creating meaningful change?
I think the number one thing is don't let perfection stand in the way of progress. There are so many huge social, environmental, economic, racial, gender, you name it, issues in the world that need to be solved. And there are so many incredible people, innovative people that are working to solve them. It's never going to happen overnight. And so progress may feel very slow, but I kind of think about it as like if you're running a marathon, you know, and you're in the first mile and you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's like 25.2 miles left to go. And if you're thinking that way, you're like, oh, I don't know if this is worth doing or is it not? But if you continue to put one foot in front of the other, 50,000 or so steps later, you will have finished that marathon. And so I think trying not to get discouraged by what feels like the lack of progress, because these are very, very large problems. And every bit that you chip away, every bit of that gap that you try to narrow will be moving all of us in the right direction.
Thank you so much. So I have an Elvis specific question. So Elvis has mentioned that there's powerful career advice that students aren't hearing elsewhere. What is it and why do you think it's being overlooked?
Yeah. So I think the best career advice that nobody is talking about is to invest. I know, and I'm guilty myself of this, is there's so much effort that we all make in our careers and, you know, trying to figure out what path to go down and, you know, how to negotiate and strategy and what should I do next. And there's a lot of attention and you're working really hard to make sure that your career is working for you. And so, but people don't pay, what you want to do is make sure that the money that you have is working equally hard for you. And all of you in this room you basically have time on your side. When it comes to investing, what we found at LFS is women wait. They wait until they have a higher paying job, or they've at least accumulated X number of dollars, or until they get a bonus, or until they get married, or until they buy a house, or, you know, when. And I'm here to tell you, please do not wait. I admonish you to invest early and often, even if it's $5 a month, because you have compounding on your side, and that is the most powerful thing in investing. Way more powerful than selecting the right stock or timing the market, which please don't do that because it doesn't work. But just having that compounding, if you are investing $5, $10 a month in a low-cost diversified portfolio, just imagine how that is going to grow over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years over your career. So don't wait. There's so many studies that show like women who start now with small amounts versus when you're 40 and you can put more money in, you're already behind the curve. So that would be my number one advice, career advice.
Well, that might be something I look into. Thank you so much. So I wanted to end off this fireside chat with a question related to the audience. So when you look at this new generation, the next generation, what gives you hope?
There's a lot. I think that gives me hope. I think I love just seeing all of the women in this room. I wish I had this community when I was graduating. Maybe I wouldn't have gone into financial services, I'm not sure. But I think for me, the younger generation, it's the curiosity that gives me hope, the asking of questions, because that's really how I believe that progress is going to be made.
Sounds great, and that's a great transition to our Q&A. So if anyone has questions for Dr. Kwan. Yeah, please, thank you. Sorry, one second.
So Dr. Hwan, thank you so much for all your incredible insights.
I wanted to ask, since you had like a lot of people around you, whether it was your classmates or your kind of like leaders who were kind of advocating for you, how do you advocate for other people within the workspace, and what can we as a community do to advocate for each other to succeed, especially in like a role that's as male dominated as like finance?
I didn't catch that last part of the question.
Well, like in maybe like a role as male dominated as like finance.
Yeah, there's so many industries, obviously, that are male dominated. I think, you know, when I was starting my career in financial services, it was definitely male dominated. And I think I was honestly naive. I don't think I really thought about it. In fact, I kind of flipped it a little bit. And so when I would go to these, you know, financial industry conferences, and there would be like 3 women in the room, for example, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, I never thought, oh gosh, you know, there's so few women in this room. I felt like, I always said to myself, whoever I'm gonna meet in this industry, in this conference, is gonna remember me because I'm one of 3 women in the room. And so I think part of it is mindset. And not thinking of it as sort of scarcity, but sometimes it's good to stand out. And thinking of it as more of an advantage. So part of it is mindset. I think you also had a question about sort of advocacy. I think obviously doesn't need to be said, but you know, you all need to advocate for yourself. But I'm also, as I've kind of come through this career, realized how important it is for all of us to show up for each other. And I told a story once. I went to a basketball game in San Francisco. It was the WNBA Golden State Valkyries. I don't know if there are any Californians here or any women's basketball fans, but the Valkyries it was their first season, and I was at this particular game, and it was a game that if they won, they would actually advance to, I think, the semifinals or something like that, which would be a really, really big deal for a team whose first season it was. And I remember it was sold out. So it was at the Chase Stadium, 80,000 people, and it was the most amazing game I've ever been in. The first 10 minutes started out pretty badly for the Valkyries. They were like down, they couldn't score. And I was thinking, this is not a good way to start the game. You'd never know it from the fans. They were cheering, they were yelling. I mean, the energy in that room was just palpable. It's almost like I could reach out and just grab it. And what it kind of, when I observed that, it was like, wow, these are 80,000 fans. It doesn't matter that they are behind in this first 10 minutes and it doesn't look good. It was almost like they had won the game. And I felt like that energy in that room really lifted up that team. They ended up winning and moving forward, which was such a huge deal. But it kind of reminded me how much we need to show up for each other in that way, because you don't know the energy that you bring, the positive perspective that you bring to another woman can really make a huge difference.
Thank you so much. And I guess just as a bonus question, as somebody who's studying business as well, but I know a lot of this room, some are really interested in fintech and some are mostly CSE. What resources do you recommend for somebody who might be new to like investing or like business in general to maybe like be a little bit more literate with kind of what's going on?
I hesitate a little bit because our research at LFS shows that women feel like they need to know it all before they get started. And so I hesitate, you know, there's a lot of women that we, you know, interviewed with, and they're like, yeah, I bought, you know, 2 dozen investment books, and I'm gonna read through them all, and then I'll be ready to go. Who has time to read 2 dozen investment books, right? And so I think, you know, certainly reading up on markets, just to get a sense of kind of what's going on. But I think, the investing industry, in my opinion, makes things a lot more complex than they really need to be. I think the best way to learn is to just do it. And today, there are amazing investing platforms out there. We no longer have that platform at Ellevest, but firms like Betterment or Wealthfront, you can start investing with very low amounts. Keep it very simple. You just want a well-diversified portfolio. And I generally tell people, like, if this is your first time investing, it could be pretty scary for sure. So even if let's say you have $100 to invest, you don't have to put it in all at once. Put in $5 a month. See how that feels. Notice what happens when markets move up and down. And what we found at Ellevest is it's the act of actually doing, even if you feel like you don't know everything, and none of us know everything, believe me. The act of actually doing something gives you the confidence to keep moving forward.
Hi, good evening. I'm not a student. I work for 10 years. And I love the way you said that, oh, I don't care about women and men. I just do my work, and I really like that. Because I feel like the more we put thoughts in there, it's more triggering. So the things which we cannot control, I should avoid that. And the things which I can do it. But I would say that one thing for you, it is a trust-killing factor which you see in the people, and you would say it is very bad for your career, or to recognize the people around you who can boost you, who can help you in your career. But for that also, they need to see the trust in you, right? So as a leader, what the thing you recognize in people which says that this is trust killer, you should never do that in your life?
Dishonesty. That's probably an obvious one. I am very much, I try to be as transparent as possible with everybody. And what I notice, certainly as a leader, you know, whether you think about it or not, people are looking at how you behave in every situation. And so I have found sometimes working with younger people, it's their first job, they want to do a good job, of course. They're afraid of making a mistake. And when they feel like they made a mistake, they don't want to come forward, right? And I'm here to tell you, please do not do that. Always, we're all human, we're going to make mistakes. But when you come forward and you take accountability, that is the sign of leadership. And when I see somebody who's made a mistake, I don't care that they made the mistake. But if they do not take accountability of it, or at least partial accountability, that actually erodes my trust.
Thank you.
So my question is that, so research often shows women as disciplined and disciplined savers actually, and long-term planners, but what financial strengths do women tend to underestimate in themselves?
I love that, and I think you're spot on. First of all, women are great savers, and women have a long-term view, and that's something that we found. So women will often take a little bit more time to kind of understand like all of the risks. I think men will be like, I know a little bit, I'm just gonna jump right in. Women wanna say, oh, okay, well let me look at this angle, let me look at that angle, let me like look at the whole picture. But once I'm in, I'm in. And so there's a lot of studies that kind of show when there's a market sell-off or some event, men will overtrade. But women would be like, oh yeah, you know, this is part of the market volatility, I remember, and they will. So it's interesting, I think it was during a day during the pandemic, and there was something that happened in the market. I don't remember what it was. And I think some of the digital investment advisors kind of got caught because there were like so many calls coming in, and their website was getting hit. And at Ellevest, we barely got any calls. And I think that kind of tells us that women, you know, once they are investing and they understand the long-term nature of it, they stick to it. So I think that's one of the big, and I think the other strength that I've seen is I think there's this perception that women are way more risk averse than men. And that may be true for some women, but our thinking is that women are more risk aware. They understand. And if I kind of think about it, you know, you think about moms, for example, you know, they're always like, what could go wrong? Like, they're always thinking, what could go wrong? Like, you know, oh, my kid, you know. And I think women are better at managing risk. And so that's another, I think, advantage that women have.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for your talk and like these incredible insights that you've given us today. Also, as a computer science and applied math major, I was super curious as to why you picked, or how you, obviously it worked out for the best, but how did you know to pick the financial sector over the tech sector? And if you could go back, would you kind of stick to that route today, or like how would you navigate your career like today if you had to start over again?
It's hard to say. I would say, I think, so when I got that first job at the bank, it was one of those, it was actually, I was hired into a management training program. And those of us in that management training program spent 3 months rotation in all different areas of the bank. And one of those rotations was actually in technology. And I spent like 3 months in HR and all of these different places. And so for me, it was fantastic because, you know, I already said, well, I wasn't sure I wanted to do technology. And so it was actually a great position for me to kick the can down the road a little bit and figure out where I wanted to be. And it's when I landed that last rotation in the quantitative investment management, something just clicked and I said, I really like the markets. I love the uncertainty of it. I love the fact that you can never like be done figuring out. It's not a problem and you're like, oh, okay, I'm done. No, because markets are so dynamic and it's driven by so many things, world events, human behavior, et cetera. And I love the dynamic landscape and the feeling that you are always trying to figure something out. And I think that's kind of what drew me. It's not like every other industry doesn't have similar challenges, but it was just something that I just found fascinating and that I loved. And I think, you know, it's not to say that I might not find something equally amazing in technology, but that was kind of where I landed and where I decided to stay.
We have time for about one more question.
Hi, my name is Pragya. I'm also a computer science student. I think one question I had for you is kind of related to how it was a turning point for you when you saw yourself reflected through someone else's eyes during your study abroad. So would you still see that now today? Like, do you still sometimes go back and see that perspective? Like you mentioned, women always look from all multiple perspectives. So what do you think about that insight today? Like, how are you?
Can you repeat the last part of your question?
How are you on that insight today? Like, do you still think like that today, of reflecting through someone else's eyes? And
you know, it's still a little bit of a struggle. I don't think it'll ever leave me. It's not like, you know, because I'm naturally more introverted, and it's a continuous, like I have to work at it. It's not like, oh, you know, I do a lot more public speaking now, but it doesn't mean that I am magically an extrovert. I think I'm much better now than I was, 25 years ago. I'm more comfortable, but it is constantly something that I have to consciously work at and remind myself. And I think that's, there was another question about sort of like surrounding yourself with people who are your advocates. And I think that's part of it is having those people reflect. And sometimes, it's not always, I don't want to give the impression that, if somebody reflects something on you, like, that's what you should pursue. There are definitely things that people, have, said, oh, I think, Sylvia, I see you, managing like a large division at X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I don't think so. And so, but there are some things that, as I mentioned in some of my stories, that, I felt like I'd closed off that path, like, oh, I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's where I think it's important when we have those, absolutes, try not to have absolutes. Sometimes, it's still going to be a no, but, always think about, could it be a yes?
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for all your amazing insights. It was really great to learn about your growth on a personal level and like in your career journey. And I hope you guys are inspired to invest now. And yeah, thank you so much for your talk. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm going to be handing it off to my co-chairs to end the ceremony for today. Thank you. One more round of applause for Sylvia, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Thank you all for staying here and joining us to close out day one of WECode 2026. You've all done a wonderful job with attending all of the panels, engaging with the community, and also discovering new parts of yourself, as well as hopefully your place within the tech community and journey. Earlier this morning during our opening remarks, we ask that you look around and think about whether or not you have seen a face that you have yet to meet. And over the course of the day, we hope that that has been kind of disproven as you've met new people, whether it is through our mentorship circles, chatting with folks as we're walking into different speaking sessions, or even in passing as we're waiting for food to be delivered and distributed.
Also wanted to just say a great thank you to everyone here. All of our team members have been moderating events, and speakers have also come up to our team, and they have been thoroughly impressed with the amounts of questions and the depth of the content of the questions. This is an amazing community, and you guys are deeply engaging with the theme and deeply engaging with how you want to be part of this community and this industry. So we also wanted to say a major thank you to you all. We are halfway done with this conference. It's already Saturday gone. There's much more in store on Sunday. Please check the schedule on the website for updated information if you're ever confused about where to go. And as always, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Alrighty, with that said, do we have any other announcements you want to make on that front?
I think less of an announcement, but to end us off for today and transitioning into tomorrow, something that we wanted to leave you guys with is a request for you to think about what you have learned, the people that you have met, the little moments that you have really treasured throughout the day. As you kind of carry them with you, not only into tomorrow, day 2 of our conference, but also once you have left this campus, once you have left the space physically, of course, what it means for you to continue on in your individual journeys. We're really, really thankful that all of you are here, and I don't think we've emphasized this enough. Thank you so much for enduring all of the weather conditions. We apologize on behalf of Cambridge for the terrible weather that we're experiencing. If there are any schedule changes due to the weather and other unforeseen circumstances, we will be posting them within the family, the WECode family Slack. So please stay on the lookout for any notifications and announcements on there, in addition to within your email inboxes. And with that, we'd love to close out day one of WECode 2026.
Just get another round of applause for all the speakers, all of the board members, everyone who put so much, technicians in the back, Scully, camera, like, thank you so much. All right, guys, see you tomorrow.